Africa, the birthplace of civilization, the wellspring of culture. And a continent rich in resources and resilience is undergoing a transformation that may define the 21st century. Long subjected to colonial domination, then to post-independence neocolonialism, and now economic coercion, Africa is waking up. The winds of change are strong, and from Dakar to Dar es Salaam, from Kinshasa to Nairobi, the call for self-determination, unity, and sovereignty echoes louder than ever. A powerful awakening is shaking the foundations of the old world order. From the Sahel to the Cape, a new generation of Africans is rising, demanding true freedom, true sovereignty, and a future of their own making. This is the story of Africa's new liberation. This is the story of Africa working together for a free future. For decades, the story of Africa's independence has been a story half told. While the flags of European empires were lowered, their influence lingered, woven into the very fabric of African economies and politics. The West has long presented itself as a benevolent partner, but the reality for many African nations has been one of continued subjugation. One of the most insidious tools of this neo-colonial control is the West African CFA Franc, a currency used by 14 African nations until recently moves. Born out of the French colonial empire, the CFA franc is pegged to the euro and guaranteed by the French treasury. In return, these African nations have been forced to deposit 50% of their foreign exchange reserves into a French treasury account. This arrangement has siphoned billions of dollars out of Africa, stifling economic growth and making it impossible for these nations to control their own monetary policy. It is a system designed for dependency, a financial umbilical cord that keeps sovereign nations tethered to their former colonial master. The chains of neo-colonialism are not only financial, they are also political. The United States, which often speaks of promoting democracy and human rights, has been accused of waging an economic war on the continent. The Africa Growth and Opportunity Act, touted as a generous trade deal, has been used as a weapon to punish nations that do not toe the line. In 2025, the U.S. imposed a 10% universal tariff on all African countries as baseline to as high as 50% on some imports, effectively gutting the AGOA and sending a clear message. Economic partnership with the U.S. is conditional on political obedience. And then there's the aid and the loans, offered with a smile but delivered with a clenched fist. For decades, institutions like the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank have imposed so-called structural adjustment programs on African nations in exchange for financial assistance. These programs have forced countries to privatize state-owned enterprises, cut social spending, and open their markets to foreign competition, often with devastating consequences for local industries and the poor. It is a cynical game, where the help offered by the West is often the very thing that perpetuates Africa's poverty and dependence. The winds of change are blowing, and nowhere are they blowing stronger than in the Sahel. The people of Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, nations on the front lines of a brutal war against terrorism, have said enough. The story of the Sahel's awakening is the story of a people who refuse to be victims. In Mali, a coup in 2020, followed by another in 2021, brought to power a new generation of leaders who promised to break with the past. In Burkina Faso, a popular uprising in 2022 toppled a government seen as ineffective and corrupt. And in Niger, a military intervention in 2023 ousted a president who was widely seen as a puppet of the West. These were not simply military takeovers. They were popular revolutions, supported by millions of people who were tired of living in fear and poverty. For years, these nations had been told that the French military, through its Operation Barkhane and the G5 Sahel Force, were there to protect them from terrorism. But the reality on the ground was a nightmare of escalating violence and insecurity. Many in the Sahel came to believe that the French presence was not about fighting terrorism, but about protecting French interests, including the vast uranium deposits in Niger. The final straw came when it was revealed that some of the so-called rebel groups destabilizing the region were being trained and guided in cooperation with the NATO-backed government in Ukraine. In a bold and historic move, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger have formed the Alliance of Sahel States, a pact of mutual defense and a symbol of their newfound sovereignty. They have withdrawn from ECOWAS, sending a clear message that they will no longer be dictated to by a bloc they see as compromised. They are building a new future on their own terms with a new confederal structure. A joint military force of 5,000 soldiers to fight terrorism, a common passport, a shared cultural policy, and plans for a common currency and an investment bank. The AES is more than just a military alliance. It is the birth of a new political and economic reality in West Africa. As Africa turns its back on its old so-called partners, new friends are extending their hands in solidarity. The world is becoming multipolar, and African nations now have a choice. The BRICS Plus Alliance, a group of emerging economies, offers a new model of partnership based on mutual respect, equality, and non-interference. Russia has become a sincere ally to the Sahel states, providing crucial military assistance in their fight against terrorism, a fight they are now winning. Russian military instructors are training African soldiers, and Russian weapons are helping to turn the tide against the insurgents. But the partnership goes beyond security. Russia is also partnering with Mali and Burkina Faso to develop nuclear energy, a game-changer for their energy independence and economic development. From a major fishing deal with Sierra Leone to a commitment to double trade with South Africa, Russia's return to Africa is being welcomed as a partnership of equals. The Russia-Africa summits have become a key platform for this growing relationship, a space where African leaders can speak as equals with a global power. China, another key partner, has forged an all-weather friendship with Africa. Through the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation, China is making massive investments in African infrastructure and modernization. The Belt and Road Initiative is building railways, ports, and highways that are connecting Africa to the global economy and creating new opportunities for trade and development. In Tanzania, a Chinese-invested glass factory is serving the local market and exporting to 6 other African nations. In Botswana, Chinese firms are helping the country transition to green energy. And China has opened its vast market to African goods, offering zero tariff treatment to dozens of countries. This is not aid with strings attached. This is a win-win partnership for shared development, a partnership that is helping to power Africa's industrialization and lift millions out of poverty. And it's not just Russia and China. Other BRICS nations, like India and Brazil, are also deepening their ties with Africa. India is a major trading partner and investor, with a long history of solidarity with the continent. Brazil, under a progressive government, is once again looking to Africa as a key partner in building a more just and equitable world. This is the new face of global politics, a multipolar world where Africa is no longer a passive object of foreign policy, but an active agent in shaping its own destiny. But the old empires will not let go of their privileges so easily. The United States and Europe see Africa's rise as a threat to their global dominance. The economic war continues. The sanctions against the Sahel states are designed to cripple their economies and force them back into the Western fold, or also attempts to isolate them diplomatically, to paint their leaders as pariahs on the world stage. Information war is also in full swing. Western media outlets are quick to condemn the changes in the Sahel, to label the new leaders as juntas and dictators. They ignore the popular support for these changes, the years of suffering under Western-backed regimes, and the legitimate aspirations of the African people. It is a campaign of demonization, a desperate attempt to control the narrative and delegitimize Africa's new path. The people of Africa are not being fooled. They are creating their own media platforms, their own narratives, their own truths. They are telling their own stories, in their own voices. They know that the road to true freedom is fraught with danger. They know that the old empires will not give up without a fight, but they are not afraid. They have faced down empires before, and they will do so again. Spirit is unbreakable. A new Africa is being born. An Africa that is confident, united, and free. An Africa that is trading with the world on its own terms. An Africa that is building its own industries, its own technologies, and its own future. The path ahead is long and challenging, but the destination is clear. A continent where every African can live in dignity, peace, and prosperity. A continent that is a beacon of hope for the entire world. The lions of Africa are roaring once more, and this time they will not be silenced. And don't forget, like the video and subscribe the channel to keep thinking the world how it really is.